Okay, so with Longzhu losing to Spenu in a rather humiliating fashion, considering the talent that is on Longzhu, as well as Spenu's place within the standings, Longzhu Gaming's chance of making it to the LCK playoffs are basically shot. It has to hope that particular teams, the ones lower in the standings, which I think it's like Samsung, as it has to like hope basically that Samsung like loses the rest of its games, which is unlikely because Kongdu Monster, like probably the worst team in the league, is one of the Samsung's opponents, so that's basically a free win there. Longzhu Gaming has hit, I think, I want to say like 10 losses or 9 losses, I think it is actually. And so like their best possible record is going to be 9-9, so they can't get like the crucial 10 wins to really sort of vie for that playoff spot and keep in contention within it. So, because of that, I wanted to kind of look on over what the expectations we had for Longzhu this season were, how they've actually sort of played out, not really sort of played out, how they've played out, and really how underwhelming this roster is. There is one like comparison that I will allude to, but I'm actually going to explore it within a proper article. This is sort of like the rough draft for it in a sense. So when we first heard Longzhu Gaming, they used to be Incredible Miracle, and then the Chinese sponsor Longzhu came on in there and they said, hey, hey, we're going to give you more money or whatever it was, and the team rebranded to support that sponsor staying with them. And with that announcement also came like, okay, here's the players that we secured during the off season. They secured Flame of the CJ days. He was on LGD Gaming last year, excuse me. Considered one of the best top laners in the history of League of Legends, like the proto quintessential carry top laner. They brought in Coco, who was a phenomenal mid laner, second best mid laner in Korea last year, and that's second only to Faker, so that was a huge compliment. And wide champion pool, excellent playmaker, all that stuff. They got Chaser. He was on Janair last year. He was like a star carry jungler position. We considered him the best jungler within Korea, possibly. They secured Fury, who we had to wait to see him play because he was banned due to like contract shenanigans. But he was the best player on Samsung last year. Massive AD carry force, really aggressive player, really fun to watch. And then they also had Pure, which was former Najee Fire support player, not really too spectacular talented, but an average support, someone who had laned with an aggressive AD carry support. So, if you put him and Fury together, he should be right at home in terms of like how to play around that style. So he has experience playing to what Fury is going to be trying to do. So, you look at that and you go, wow, these are like the best players from several teams, Flame being the only exception on LGD, although when LGD crashed and burned, he looked like the best player. But back in LGD peak days, he wasn't. So you have that conglomeration coming together, and it very much looked like a super team, and like how the narrative goes with pretty much every super team that we've ever really seen, the pieces just don't come together. Or in this case, there was another complication into the piece. So Longzhu, first had like this 5-man roster that we looked at and we said, damn, that's a sick roster. But then Longzhu was also like, by the way, we also have another 5-man roster. So we have a 10-man roster, and we're going to be experimenting with this. So the other 5 players that they brought was Expression for the top lane. He's been around in the scene for a while. They had Crash. He was a new guy in the jungle. They brought in Frozen. I think he was on Incredible Miracle. I can't remember who he was on with before. It might have been Spenu. I could be crazy. Just like another okay average mid laner, really per se. They had Captain Jack, who used to be on Janair Green Wings, and he moved on over here. Okay, he's there to sort of fill in for Fury up until the point where Fury gets unbanned and can join in. And then Zeus, I gotta think a largely unknown support talent, at least I haven't heard of him. I could be wrong, maybe he's had some experience before. Okay, so then you have like these, like this 10-man roster, and me personally, I looked at that and said, okay, well, maybe those guys will just be subs that we won't really see too often. Maybe they'll just be there to kind of motivate the main roster that we expect to really step on up and do it. Instead, what happened was that Longzhu did constant roster rotations, experimenting with a whole bunch of different lineups. They started with Expression, Chaser, Coco, Captain Jack, and Pure. That was like that was like the starting roster. And then the other roster that they did, they would sometimes swap out a single player. Sometimes they would only keep a single player. They did that recently where they had a roster with Flame, Chaser, Coco, Fury, and Pure, and then they completely failed out. This might have been against Rocks Tigers, maybe even SK Telecom. I can't remember who they played. But, everyone looked pretty bad, except for Flame. He looked pretty good. So they kept Flame in. I think this might have been against KT. They kept Flame, but then swapped out Chaser, Coco, Fury, Pure, put in the other guys. I don't have to say all their names again. So they've, always done, these really crazy roster switches within the middle of a series. They've, started with different lineups. And ultimately, if you look at Longzhu, there are times when you look at Longzhu and say, okay, this is what we've expected from them. This looks like a really elite-level team. It's very clean. They 2-0'd Samsung very recently, though in rather dominating fashion. They used the Expression, Chaser, Coco, Fury, Pure lineup for that one. And again, it looked pretty much fairly good. And then they've also looked like crap with that very same roster. Just now against Spenu, they got 2-0'd by it and even losing to a Jarvan mid. Although, again, the Jarvan mid was a really smart pick given the context of it. It had a lot of burst damage. And then in game 1, Spenu had this really interesting, Jugger Rise, speed engaged comp. It was very fun to watch and really trollsy as well. But, you look at this team Longzhu and it looks like that they look like they know what to do with the first 10-15 minutes of a game, but then if there's a complication within the game, or if they fall behind it all, they just look really lost, which is unusual given the fact that sometimes this roster is composed of veteran talent, talent that's had LCK experience, that's been in the scene for a while, and the fact that no one on the team seems to know how to properly respond to situations or press advantages, or play from behind rather, is really disturbing, to say the least. Greatest example of this, I think, would be their series against KT. I think it was game 2, or I can't remember how many series that game went to. It was the one where Someday played, I almost said Flame because I associate this champion with Flame a lot. It almost looks like the one where Someday played Gangplank, and Longzhu just kept on diving him. They killed him 4 times in the first 12 minutes, and then they try to make this teleport flank in the mid lane, and when that backfired, they just stopped making plays, which is what they needed to do. They had this pick composition where the whole point of it is to be aggressive, beat down KT before KT has time just to farm up and scale. Once one of those plays went wrong, though, they just said, okay, never mind, we're just going to farm and chill. But no, that's what KT wants to do. KT outscales you. You shouldn't be letting them farming, but they did. Someday got back into the game, even got a 100 CS lead over Flame, despite Someday having been camped the entire early game. And KT won that game because Longzhu just let off the pressure when it shouldn't have. That's one of the most concerning things. Ultimately, looking at it too, it seems like a lot of the players here have really just not been playing well either. Chaser has been really sort of hit and miss this season. He's had moments where his invades have looked, he's done the classic Chaser route, he's gotten the gang pressure down, but then he's also been outshone by Crash, who, to be fair, has looked phenomenal at times. But, Crash goes from, hey, let's do this counter gank triple kill, I'm gonna go invade the red buff and immediately feed a kill, within 30 seconds. So, there's a lot of inconsistencies within there, a lot of, amateur mistakes from Crash. But Chaser, he's had marginal impact on the map from time to time. His ganks have been okay, but he seems to be really lacking in terms of this season. Coco's been completely underwhelming this season, to be honest. His Azir in particular, with Azir coming back into the meta, we flash back to last year when Coco's Azir was one of the best within Korea. It looks nothing like that anymore. He looks really lost. I wouldn't say lost in the champion. He knows how to play the champion, but he just doesn't seem to have the timings right, and he's been singled out a lot for it, which is, again, unusual because of how good he was last year on this champion. But he hasn't really had the same sort of MVP player impact that he did on CJ Entis. It's not like it's someone else on Longzhu stepping on up. It's Coco isn't hitting those plays. Flame has looked okay throughout most of the season, I think, as has Expression. Expression, I think, has had more of his problems, namely some teleport flanks. If you get Expression on the right champion, his teleport flanks are really well. Sometimes, though, you see Expression just play a Flame strategy. I'm going to farm in a late game champion. That's just okay, why isn't Flame in there? Flame would do that 100 times better. Well, maybe not 100 times better. But we associate Flame with that, and so it makes me kind of think about, maybe Longzhu's not juggling his strategy all that well, or doesn't know how the draft phase is going to go. Again, Expression has mostly been fine. He has had some of his issues, I think, in 1v1s, as well as in some of his teleport plays, although I think they're a little better than Flames. I have to look at all the VODs again. Let's see, zoom in over that. Frozen, he's been okay. He's had a couple of good stand-up games, but he doesn't have the highs that Coco should be theoretically having. Fury, by all means, probably has been the most disappointing player on this roster, for me at least personally, because we've been waiting for him to come back on in, and he's looked like crap from time to time. He's been overextending several times, he's been caught out a lot of the time. Like, it's, you know, when you look at Jack has been pretty much fairly reliable for the team, which I think is actually a good base because the team has a lot of playmakers on it with Chaser and Coco. So having a more conservative AD carry just to not overextend so that Chaser could focus on the top half of the map is totally fine. And Jack has been fairly safe, although he doesn't really go for like these aggressive plays that, you know, the team could occasionally need. I think that the team doesn't really need that. Whereas Fury, he's looked bad on Jhin, like atrociously bad on Jhin. He's been overextending and been caught out sometimes at critical moments. And then if we talk about Pure has been a really limited support within this season. He's got one of the smallest effective champion pools. He's played a bunch of different champions, but again, they're really effective. Like, he's had this weird fascination with Bard where, you know, okay, he's had good games on Bard, but he's also had bad games on Bard. But it's not like Mad Life's Bard where you can count, like, it's going to be, like, just fantastic no matter when he plays it. He's been really hit or miss in there, and in the Spenu series as well, he's, like, made some really poor decision-making, particularly the face check in Game 1. I think it was Game 1, or was it Game 2? He face checked in one of the games, I think it was Game 1, and when he had a Trundle, he could have waited for his pillar cooldown to come on up, or he could have had better vision control, I suppose. And because of that, Spenu was able to kill him, then kill Chaser, then take Baron, then close the game. It was pretty awful. And then Zeus, I mean, I haven't seen a whole lot of Zeus. It just doesn't look like it's really too effective there. So, and then you get all these pieces as well juggling around. You get players who have been underperforming from expectations of based on what we've seen from them before, and a real lack of synergy within. Like Longzhu, again, it looks like they know what to do if they have a lead, but it looks like if they fall behind or if something comes up, they just don't know how to play, which is something that we'd expect, honestly, from like the less veteran roster or like younger talent with less experience, not like these guys who have been around for quite a while who have like at least a year of competitive experience. It's very peculiar like that. I personally think it's because that Longzhu's practice times, as well as how maybe perhaps its internal environment, is so messed up from this 10-man roster, trying to make like this, oh, we're going to have like these 10-man roster, and you know, we're going to be able to swap out players mid-series, have these super sick differences in strategy, you know, that they failed that premise, and it's hurting their practice time. You know, if their whole goal is to be able to switch up strategies on the time, well then if you look at how they're using Expression and Flame, they're already not doing that, because Expression is doing strategies that we associate Flame to do. So it looks like Longzhu doesn't even know what they're going to be doing within a game. It's like, okay, well, I don't know what's going to be open, or we're going to play on this thing. There doesn't seem to be a whole lot of rhyme or reason strategically, at the very least, for these roster moves. It more looks like based on individual performance. Okay, so then the idea based on that would be create an in-house competitive environment. Well, it doesn't seem to be working because these players aren't cohesive, like consistently cohesive. These players are struggling at times to have their individual performances, and it looks like that as the series goes on, if they lose, then like the players just seem to go on tilt, and like the games get increasingly less competitive from Longzhu's side of it, as the players are just like, it seems to be going on tilt, which we know that I think it's Chaser and Coco are emotional players, so that's an element of chemistry within the team. But they're probably even more emotional by thinking like, oh man, no, I messed that up, now coach is going to bench me, you know, it's, you know, I want to make it up, but, you know, I'm freaking out right now because I'm probably going to be swapped out, or, you know, whatever. I don't know what the internal environment personally is. I'm just going off of based on the outside internal factors. But what seems to be clear, though, is that Longzhu isn't gelling like it should, and this 10-man roster idea, I think, is an inhibition to it. I mean, if we compare this to Liquid, this is the comparison I alluded to at the start of the video, Liquid had this idea for 10-man roster. They dumped that in the first week, and Liquid's making playoffs. Longzhu didn't, and now they're sitting 7th, 6th place with some of the best, 7th or 8th place, I think, with some of the best talent within the whole league, well, or like theoretically the best talent in some of the league, and it's failing to do anything together. It seems like all at once, the super team curse that we've seen happen with like OMG, Team Solo Mid, that afflicts League of Legends where super teams just don't work, is being complicated further by a lack of development and synergy, as well as good practice time, because of this 10-man roster idea. I personally think that Longzhu needs to, for summer season, Longzhu seriously needs to consider abandoning this approach. I don't know if it's just keeping some players, you know, paid as substitutes, but then you just pick a roster, you stick with that roster, or if it's time for or if you let those players go to some different teams. I know that, who really knows at this point what the offseason for spring and summer is going to look like, but it's painfully clear that Longzhu's 10-man roster approach is holding the team back. Its strategies are falling behind. The one particular roster only works for so long, and it seems like the team, rather than trying to address those long-term issues and make it work so that it will actually function, just says, okay, we're going to swap out players. It's a short-term solution that only works short-term. It's not a long-term answer, and I don't know if Longzhu is looking for long-term answers while still trying this idea of making a 10-man roster work. I think it's an endeavor that they have to give up on because they do have talent that, can win an LCK tournament. They just need to start using it properly and start giving it the practice time and the attention and the coaching that it needs to have, and work out the kinks that are holding it back so that it can actually develop and grow. It needs to start taking the mistakes it's making, learning from them, having the players apply those lessons, consistently stay on in there, redeem themselves, not be put down on the bench, and then Longzhu can maybe pull together a better summer season.